Hi, welcome to the Patch My PC Deep Dive video of the month. Today, we're going to be taking a look at policy. Due to the sheer size of the topic, we will be breaking this out into several videos. I'm Jake, one of the engineers here at Patch My PC, and I'll pass it off over to Cody. He can introduce himself.
Hello there, I am Cody Mathis. I'm a software engineer here at Patch My PC, and hopefully we'll be digging into client settings and policy, and specifically the software update node today.
Cool. I am Justin. I am the founder here at Patch My PC.
Hi, I'm Jordan. I'm one of the engineers here at Patch My PC.
Oh, hi, I'm Priscilla. I'm the new customer support engineer here at Patch My PC.
Hi, I'm Andrew. I'm a support engineer here at Patch My PC.
All right. So with that said, just a little context of the topic. So we have been getting quite a few requests for covering policy. So we do have a future topics page on the learn.patchmypc.com website. So if you do have any feedback, leave a comment, send us an email. And we're covering topics based on what we get feedback on. Now, this is a topic that's big enough that we did want to split it out. Policy, it's a lot of different moving parts. So we're going to look at a few different feature sets. So for example, we're going to be looking at software update policy today and things to look out for that. But once again, learn.patchmypc.com. You can check out the Understanding Software Update Chain will be this book, this page that we're looking at for today's deep dive. So that will include resources that we talk about, both links to Microsoft as well as some different queries that we may be using, just something to go along with the video. So if you want to learn and do some of the settings that we're doing in the video, you have a reference of what we're actually doing for that. So that said, I'll hand things off to Jordan and Cody, who will be doing most of the demoing.
Cool. Thanks, Justin. All right. So yeah, as Justin said, policy in and of itself is kind of a very large talking point. So in order to kind of break it down, we wanted to start off with talking about software updates, something that we're all as a team kind of pretty familiar with in that particular area with what we do. So something that kind of starts off always confusing is whenever you first install a configuration manager environment, the default scheduling here is set to occurs every 7 days, effective, etc., and scheduling a deployment reevaluation every 7 days. And if you think about it, 7 days probably seems like, man, that could be a really long time to wait from when like first patch Tuesday happens to when a client scans and gets in data. And it's weird because it's not really as long as you think it might be, because this 7 days is a little misleading. That's just what the default schedule is behind the scenes. There are other events that can cause those to actually happen. So the first one that we want to talk about to happen, which is the one that seems kind of counterintuitive at first, is the fact that whenever a new software update group is assigned as to be deployed to the machine, this causes a policy evaluation to happen. So machine policy triggers, and it reaches out and gets the assignment, realizing there's a new assignment for a software update. It then triggers a scan to evaluate what is or is not applicable to the machine. And we're actually going to, in a little bit here, we're going to demo kind of through and show that in the log files how it works.
Yeah, because what makes this interesting is you commonly see a lot of environments where they will move these way down to a day, or sometimes even less. They will make them evaluate, or want them to evaluate even more frequently than a day. And there's kind of an initial misunderstanding that I'm not going to get software updates for 7 days, and that's really not the case. We'll kind of walk through some of the scenarios that trigger these scans without you even knowing it. And we'll also kind of explain what happens during these reevaluations and scan schedules.
Yeah, and something that's kind of interesting to note is about that is there's certain components of the scan process, because of the fact that configuration manager is involved, that are implemented that are different from a WSUS scan natively. We've actually got an article in there that's just kind of a general overview. It'll be in the Git book. I think we've actually got it here. Yeah. You scroll down, it's towards the bottom here, that does kind of a generic overview of this process that talks about it, because otherwise you could end up in a scenario where you end up overwhelming it with the number of different ways that a scan can get kicked off. especially not being aware of all those different ways. So the first one, though, like I say, it's that whenever that policy runs and determines there's an assignment. The second one is anytime a scheduled instance. So that's this, right? These are your scheduled instance, and these are randomized to a degree. So when it says occurs every 7 days, this is another important thing to think about. So let's say I have 50,000 clients in an environment, and I say occur every 1 day at 9 o'clock. That does not mean that all 50,000 clients kick off at 9 a.m. to start policy evaluating. That would be a terribly unfortunate experience for the WSUS server, right? So those are randomized. I think, if I remember correctly, those are they're randomized over a 24-hour period. Is that sound like that rings true?
I think it's 2 hours, actually.
Is it 2 hours? Okay, I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
2 or 24.
It's 2 hours. Yeah. So, and each individual client, right, is also 7 days since the past time it did it, right? So it's not like they're all on the exact same 7-day cycle. It's just that they need to do it every 7 days individually. And then once it hits its deadline, it's randomized, plus or minus 2 hours. I think maybe not minus, plus 2 hours up to a 2 hour delay.
Yeah. Another one that's kind of an interesting note around these two is every time a deployment is completed. So every time the deployment is completed, that means that it goes through the software update group list. It's evaluated every single one of the updates. So if we have the software update group with some updates in it, maybe there's like 4 updates in it, it would finish evaluating the list of what's applicable or not applicable, installing them, and then it would say, yeah, I'm good to go, and I need to rescan to turn in the current status. That's why when you look in the monitoring node, under the deployments phase. Now, we don't have any deployments yet, but we will later, and we'll come back and kind of showcase this. You might see some that are in progress that have a yellow pie chart or something like that. It's just because they haven't rebooted yet, but the assignment of those updates has completed at that point. Another one is that there's another sometimes maybe time when a evaluation might happen, and that's actually...
Should be able to show it on the ADR, yeah.
Yeah. Over here is actually in the deployment settings of the ADR. So this was added back, I want to say, was this 1806 that this was added?
The reboot one at the bottom there?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
I don't know when this one was added, but I know it wasn't an original feature. It was a new feature for it. Is that if any update in the deployment requires a system restart, then run the deployment evaluation cycle after the restart. And that actually triggers a software update scan as well, again, because it needs to rerun that evaluation to determine what should or shouldn't install, if there's any new applicability rules.
Apparently it was, that was a commandlet. That's been around a while. The 1700 builds, yeah.
Okay.
TP.
Yeah. I know it wasn't original in 2012,
right.
But yeah. So this is kind of a new one that a lot of people, if you've had stuff, if you've had ADRs running for forever, that have just kind of missed. But this is really great if you have updates that have a chain or something like that. Again, though, it does trigger even more software update scans in your environment. And the last one, Cody, I think the last one's kind of interesting because you pointed that one out, which is a new one that not a lot of people know about, is the servicing stack one. If you want to talk about that one real quick.
Yeah, so this one's pretty new. Definitely the newest, the newest one that comes to mind. So as of version 2002, do you want to pull up the article? I think we have this exact area in the KB linked. So starting in version 2002, if a servicing stack update occurs, there will trigger a software update evaluation cycle afterwards. Now, the scenario this accounts for is a pain point where a servicing stack update is a prerequisite for the latest cumulative or any similar scenario. So if the servicing stack update installed and then a scan did not happen, you may not immediately apply a cumulative update or whatever needed that prereq. So they added this back in 2002, and an important note would be the client actually is, the component here that matters, right? So the config-man client on the endpoint needs to be at least 2002. SSU installs, a scan happens. and I think what's good to emphasize as part of this is these are all scans. These are going to hit your, WSUS server. These are going to be resources that are getting used. So the more often these are all happening across your fleet, the more resources are going to get used on your WSUS server. And we've got more recent recommendations from Microsoft to be doing SSL, right? Do HTTPS. That involves even more resources. So if you're not conscious of all of these possible scan points, you're going to be seeing increased resource usage, and you're going to be seeing some of those common like bad gateways and app pool crashes in general. So just good to be aware of them.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting that you should mention that and talk about scans, and we talk about these software update groups and like that. Something that gets brought up a lot of the time too is this kind of things like software update maintenance or things like that. Like, where does all this really go for resources and stuff like that? And for things like that, I think it's actually kind of interesting if we step over into let's go ahead and create a software update here. I'm going to just publish something really quickly here and get it to install. So we have an update. If we just do...
This is all totally related to any patching and updates in Config Man, but this is a quick way for us to get a patch and not have to go out to Microsoft.
Yeah, and wait for 2 minutes for it to sync or anything. If I could type, that would be helpful probably. Newfangled keyboards. There we go. I'm just going to go ahead and do Notepad++, because why not?
Notepad++ does have dark mode now.
It's true.
Yeah, I saw that. Was it version 8?
Yeah.
It's fancy.
All right.
Patch My PC's got to step it up.
I know.
You can actually disable the automatic update message now too, I believe.
Oh, you can?
Yep.
All right, so just kind of for some context here, that sync is going to trigger this ADR over here, just so that we're aware. Once that finishes syncing, it will trigger this ADR, which is then going to create a software update group, and that software update group will then get targeted to our test client, which is where we're going to go over next. So, sorry.
Yeah, and so we kind of mentioned, right, those triggers for a scan. So if we actually look, we did see we had those schedules set for 7 days, right? So it's pretty unlikely that scan cycle 7-day randomization is going to happen during this meeting. And so it's a good example of when a software update group gets assigned to a device, we can go and request machine policy. We're actually going to see a scan cycle happen. So we can pull up the client and see that happen. So we've got downloaded and deployed. It's ready to go. We've got no data. This is brand new. It's the first time the client's going to ever see it.
Yep. So that's all set up. It's all deployed and everything over there. Now, if I jump over here to our client, we can see we don't have any software update points currently, or any software updates currently here inside of Software Center. Now, I'm going to jump over into some logs real quick. And just as a quick note, we do have verbose logging turned on here for all the logs in the client. Just in case you're curious, this is where you go to turn that on. You would set the log level to 0 in order to enable that to get the verbose logs for it. Another cool thing about that, just as kind of a side note for that, you can enable that from the console if you want to. If you're remote troubleshooting a client and you don't have direct access, you can actually come in here and you can enable verbose logging and disable verbose logging temporarily, and then you can actually collect those logs directly from a remote machine too. Just kind of a cool little sidebar on that.
And that doesn't require policy to run?
Correct. It's BGB.
Correct. It's BGB. Yeah.
Which build was that? I know it's relatively recent.
Ooh, newish. I don't know.
So,
yeah, it's newish.
If you don't have it, you're going to have to update to one of the newer builds.
Current version.
Yeah.
Enable fast ring. Do it.
Do it
there
now.
you go.
But cool. So
2002.
First, let's go ahead and open up some WUAHandler over here and scroll on down. So we can see that the last time there was a scan that happened was probably right after we reset the machines earlier before the demo was earlier today. So it's already happened. It's not happening right now. It should happen in a few hours. And if we get policy opened up here, let's go ahead and get policy agent opened up.
Yeah, well, in theory, like assuming there wasn't an assignment that just got deployed, it would probably not happen for 7 days based on our client settings.
Yeah. So right now our client settings dictate that every hour policy should run, right? Inside of our client settings. So we have it set to every hour in client settings, but we're not going to wait that long. We're just going to go to control panel and have it run.
There's totally a shortcut for this on the desktop.
Is there? Well,
yeah, Justin's very meticulous about his demo labs. They're all the same.
So now if I just click this machine policy retrial, we're going to watch the log over here, and we should see that a new assignment comes in and gets assigned to this machine. Now, we did see that there's no user assignments, but let's go ahead and hit run now.
Yeah, so we actually see actual config too. So if we have WMI Explorer, so if you've never used it, we do have it linked in the article. This is a really useful tool. WMI is a very core component to Configuration Manager, and that's true on the server side as well as the client side. And we can actually see this actual config area. And so we can kind of look at this. And some of there's a lot of interesting bits we can look at. The ones that are relevant here, we kind of tried to highlight them in the article. So we'll go through some of that. And this should take just a moment. So while we wait for it, actually,
there
let's
it is.
pull
Right
up.
there. Cleared deleted item CCM update source. It's going to probably come here soon in a second. That's the update piece starting.
Yeah. So while we wait, so if we actually look at the settings on the server, and we've kind of looked at that UI, right, with like the re-eval settings, enabling third-party updates, we can kind of start to chat about those a little bit, and we can see them in WMI. So we could actually validate on a client that these settings are applied in policy, right? So there's all kinds of good bits and pieces there. If we scroll down, we've got scroll just a bit. There it is. Software update clients.
Yeah.
Yep. So this is the area in WMI that maps to that section of client settings, right? So we've got enabled true. That's your yes, no, and other bits and pieces like third-party patching is true. Cert pinning, which is a relatively new feature, true. So you can see these kind of all map right over to that client settings. And there's some internal bits and pieces too that are in place. So yeah, I mean, this is a really good thing to be able to come in and validate. I think particularly, for us, like, is enable third-party updates. Is the client actually receiving that policy and processing it, and other bits like service window, where's the other one? There's reserve.
I think another one that's kind of fun here is the location timeout too, for fiddling with things.
Yeah, so for location timeout, right, you can have multiple SUPs and then actually fall back. So you can see what that fallback rate is, and that's in seconds. So SUP fallbacks are super aggressive. It takes a lot for it to choose to fall back.
I'm trying to remember. I think we saw it down in here. There's one down in the policy here that actually shows for like the retry error codes too, as well. Like what are considered error codes that would generate a failover.
So that should actually be in, if you go back, source, update source. I think it is.
Update source. Is that the one? It's that one because it's these one here. It's the scan retry failure error codes. So this actually was a really common thing back. I think it was pre 16 something back when they implemented the ability to do like failover between software update points properly through boundary group association, where these error codes were the only known error codes that could potentially cause a failover between them. And there was the firewall error code, EE2, was not recognized as in this list, just kind of a side note. But this is actually where you can see on the client how the client gets those different error codes and knows what those error codes are. That's just kind of an interesting thing.
When a failure happens, right, not all scanned failures indicate, hey, I should fail over to another software update point. And so there is a statically defined list. And at one point, there was even like a blog you'll find out there showing you how to append to that list. And that EE2 firewall, exit code would actually then trigger a failover, right? Because if you can't access it due to a firewall issue, then, all right, it makes sense to fail over to another sub. What's the client
creating
like?
Another machine policy here, just because I'm wondering if we didn't quite wait long enough on it. So I don't see it triggering the scan yet.
So if we look at updates deployment, do we see the new assignment?
Pop the updates deployment log open.
Yeah, because I think depending on the client setting, there might be like so we've got the cert now. Scroll up a bit. Do we see installed. Like there's an assignment? Keep going. There you go. So nothing there.
0. That's at 8:44.
Okay.
It may still be chomping on policy, to be honest with you. It took a handful.
Yeah, it took a little bit to get it before.
Interesting. And we've got it deployed.
Yep. It's all happy.
Cool.
All right, cool. So we've waited a few moments here, and we're just going to kind of jump back to the client here. Okay, maybe.
You might have to request control again. Oh,
There we
you got
go.
it.
Or lag.
you
I'm
done?
just gonna
Hold on, let me try to snap this
help.
back. Here, let me try to put this back here. There we go.
There we go. Cool. All right. So what we did, however, see is that while scan hasn't actually happened yet. So if we come back over into here, you can see that we haven't had a scan happen yet. We're still waiting on a scan to occur, but the policy has actually triggered, and we can see that the software update group is properly assigned. So we actually come in down here, we can see the update assignment group, or the assignment of the software update group is assigned. So we can actually see here's the name of the software update group. Here's the actual CIs, or the updates that are in it for it, with the information for it. And then if we actually come to here,
The actual software updates are in client SDK, which those wouldn't be there yet because it hasn't processed.
Yeah, because it hasn't actually processed to see which ones are applicable or not applicable.
But
yeah,
within that update CI assignment, if you go to the assigned CIs and then grab that first one there and actually get the XML.
Yeah.
Like if you want to just copy it out and
and take it in a notepad or something. Yeah.
So this is the
you
can see it's Notepad++, right?
Yeah,
so these are the CIs associated with the SUG. So we have it in policy. We just have not actually done the local evaluation of the policy by the client to then show in Software Center. So it looks like we might be a little unlucky. That deadline or the randomization of that is probably going to hit us here 2 hours. We were pretty lucky in all of our fun little test runs, right? It happened within about 5 minutes. But right now we're kind of at the mercy.
Did it work?
No, that's because you opened Software Center. I like the exclamation mark.
That's kind of interesting, though, just that it shows, they're currently, and it's not actionable because the scan hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. For sure. So we can kind of let this set and then look at a couple of other components while we wait, though. So if we go back over to the search side.
Yeah.
And we kind of have that list of the client settings that we're looking at. So let's see here. Awesome. Yep. So there are some newer ones, right? We've got the cert pinning and then the proxy, user proxies, that sort of stuff. So these are newer security related settings that are made available. So there's a lot of good Microsoft content around these that we will link out to at a high level. These ones are security related, right? So by default now, that allow user proxy, the one just above there, that one is by default, they prefer a system proxy and then it will fall back to a user proxy. Microsoft is kind of, sitting on the stance of this is the secure config. This is how we're going to, have it set up by default. You can allow the fallback to the user proxy. You have to control that here or via GPO. And then that second component, this is not something that, I've actually configured. I started toying with it in the lab a little bit. So there's a new certificate store, and they outline this in the docs we'll link. And I think we could actually, if we don't have, can we pull up the Git book there, Jordan? I think
we have it in there actually.
If not, I'll link it real quick too. There's deltas, maintenance windows.
Nope, it doesn't look. We have that one.
I will link it real quick.
Yeah, we can add it.
So cert pinning actually will let you end up populating the server auth certificate. You end up placing it in a certificate store on the client. If you just search cert pinning WSUS, it's like the first. Oh, you're binging it. I don't know if you're going to find it.
Oh, no.
There it is.
It's fine. See? Works great.
Yeah. So back in January, they released this article, and it talks about a couple of things. One of them is the proxy bit. So that's that fallback behavior and what's allowed. And then the other one is going to be that cert pinning. And it does require HTTPS. That's a very important note. And that's echoed kind of throughout. Microsoft is encouraging HTTPS config.
Yeah.
So just some newer, security related settings in that software update client settings. Let's see here.
So what does this do? Does this put the SSL certificate for WSUS on the client side as trusted, or is this something else?
Not as trusted, but
Kinda.
yes, it's like a form of validation. So
I
from
see.
my understanding, it's actually giving the client like a copy or it's an extra form of validation.
Okay.
So it's not quite client auth, right? But it's actually saying, hey, this server needs to use this cert in order to be valid.
I see.
And it's matching against the thumbprint is what we had found is that it basically the client has to have the same cert with the same thumbprint, and then it matches that thumbprint against the server, which is kind of like client auth, but without a client auth certificate. So
yeah, kind of an interesting one. So
yeah,
let's see here.
Go check and see if our client has decided to. Not yet. Nope. So we're still waiting on that to start.
In a pinch, we can kick one off just to show what the logs look like, just with that, if that randomization does bite us here. Yeah. But some of the other ones in here, so we do have the Delta content. This is a relatively new feature as well. It's got a lot of interesting implications. So we do have an KB article that we talk about this having a bug as it relates to third-party updates. This has since been fixed. There used to be a problem with Delta updates being on and third-party updates not downloading. That's been fixed as of 2006, I think we heard. But you can see that these settings map over again to WMI. So there are actually settings in here in WMI for Delta. I want to say right there. Yep, that is, I believe, what the Boolean would turn true, false. There's also some remnants of Express updates in here too. Actually, there it is. No, the Express updates port. So they still call it Express. That's actually kind of fun because there's the port 8005. It would actually be the Enable Express. Yeah. So right there.
Interesting thing.
It is. So that's going to be those Delta updates. And if we enable it, if you want to actually enable it, can't hurt. We could look at the WUAHAndler.log when that flips through.
That. Come over here. Then let's go get us some more policy. More policy.
So Delta, one of the interesting things with Delta, it gives you some interesting options. So Microsoft has released a lot of features recently around for DPs, and one of them was the Microsoft Connected Cache. And you can have a combination of turning on Delta using Microsoft Connected Cache, and then stop having deployment packages. And when you do that, you actually end up with like a self-managed cache on your distribution points. Yeah, there we go. So we can see it's disabled. That's the old setting. So you can end up with a Microsoft Connected Cache on your distribution point that uses Delta downloads. It goes to Microsoft. It uses a local cache. You stop managing update content. So some interesting feature sets there.
And config.
It may stay false until the scan cycle actually processes it. That's actually kind of interesting. Let's see what it does. Policy download started.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, there we go. There's stuff happening.
Yep.
Unlock actual config, deleted.
Yeah, see if it's true now in WMI.
In the log.
Nope. Not yet.
That's
policy is strange.
So
it's on. There it goes. Yes.
Oh, there it goes. It just turned on. Yep. So Delta download controller has started now. Yeah. So let's go refresh WMI again and see if it updates over here.
There it is.
There it goes.
Yep.
Yep.
So now we see true. So you can kind of see that's where that directly maps over to these settings.
Cool. So while we're waiting for the scan, maybe we'll pause this a few minutes, and depending on how long it takes, we'll come back and potentially trigger it, but I think we're at that delay right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the other component we want to talk about at this point is more or less there's a setting around maintenance windows, which would lead us kind of to talking about maintenance windows.
Is that something that we wouldn't really be able to hit until the client starts scanning?
Well, yeah. So we can talk about the setting, which is the enable install of all, and then we can kind of show maintenance windows and actually business hours. So I think it could be good. There's a good article we link to that discusses business hours and maintenance windows, and I don't think that a lot of people fully get that one, and it covers it really well.
Okay, yeah. So we're still recording. So if there is anything that we want to cover on maybe the settings of maintenance windows where that's configured on the collection, maybe we can hit that, and then if we still haven't scanned, we'll give it a pause and see what we can do.
Off.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Awesome. Fire away.
No, go ahead.
All right. So we do have a setting here that we want to talk about as well. There's a few others that
bug.
Yeah. So enable installation of software updates in an all deployment maintenance window. Software update maintenance window is available. It's a mouthful. It's very descriptive, which usually means it's very confusing. Like Jordan said, this is kind of like a bug that was not a bug. They actually used telemetry to determine they had to make this a changeable option. The end result would have been very bad if they just changed this to what they originally intended. So there's different types of maintenance windows which we can look at, and namely here, right, we have all deployments and we have a software updates maintenance window. This yes/no option will change the behavior of when software updates are allowed to happen. So if we look at the setting as it is, if you have two types of maintenance window assigned to a machine, an all deployments window and a software updates maintenance window, with this set to no, if both exist, the only time software updates will apply is during a software update maintenance window. A all deployments maintenance window will not allow software updates with this set to no and both windows existing.
So where that gets weird is if you use a all deployments or if you use a software updates never patch type of window and you try to use it in the past or in the future, you could cause strange behavior to happen because both types of windows might be on the collection or might be available to that particular client as a result. Which would cause a lot of weird things. And so one of the common practices for a long time, I mean, since Config Manager, like 2007 days, long time, probably even before that, was you would create a never patch or you would create a safety maintenance window.
Do you want to show that? Let's go to a collection.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and go look at a collection on that because the thing about maintenance windows is that if there are no maintenance windows, then everything is a maintenance window. It can do whatever it wants. Whenever it wants, except for business hours. Well, sometimes ish, right? As you have stories about. Like it's a maybe thing. So if we come over here to this collection here, one of the things that we have is we have this maintenance windows option here where we can create different maintenance windows. And if we click the new button here, we can actually create maintenance windows of a different type, different name, and with different schedules. Now, one of the interesting things to note here, so if I was to just write something like monthly patching, right? I wanted my servers to patch every month on the day after Patch Tuesday, right? Something like that. Seems pretty simple, right, as an idea. So one of the challenges with this is that while in the ADR, you can do something like the second Tuesday, but with an offset of 1, you cannot do that with maintenance windows. This is one of the major challenges with doing this. There are ways that you can do this with PowerShell. Maintenance windows have the ability to all be scripted out. There's pretty good documentation. There's some pretty good community blogs out there on how to do this. But you can do that where you can create your own recurrent schedules. These are the limiting options for that. And the different types of maintenance windows that you have down here are these three. There's all deployments, software updates, and task sequences. Another interesting behavior note is that task sequences can also be counted and have the same behavior linkage with all deployments maintenance windows, which was something I didn't know until I was actually researching and reading about this. There's a note blurb on the maintenance window stuff there for that behavior is controlled by that same flag as well.
So a never maintenance window, as an example, right? You might that would put you in this kind of problematic scenario. Pick some time eventually, or in the past.
Some time in the past. Like you could do something like this, where it was then and no recurrence.
Yep. So we now have an all deployments maintenance window. The machine now is aware of, hey, I have a maintenance window of this type. Mm-hmm. You take this and then you combine it with that setting of how do I handle multiple types of maintenance windows? Mm-hmm. And if they would have changed the setting to what they intended to and actually adjusted the functionality, you'd have seen a lot of machines, a lot of servers, devices, whatever, that would have stopped patching, right? And they used telemetry to look at the environments and say, we can't actually go back to our originally intended behavior. We're going to cause a lot of problems. So they made it a configurable option and defaulted to the technically broken behavior.
Yeah. Well, they defaulted to the technically broken behavior on any existing config manager instance, but for builds and newer that were built with 1806, for brand new builds, they defaulted to the desired behavior. That was the other weird thing. So I think there's a note, I think it's the 1806 edition of that, where starting in 1806, any config manager environment that started at that branch level is in the desired behavior of I think it's yes, is the desired behavior, right? Because all deployments should be all deployments, right?
Yep.
And software updates can be a all deployments one. But yeah.
So good things to know. Kind of oddities that have just kind of happened over the years that you come across.
Yep.
Let's see
Jump
if
back over to our client and see.
You feeling lucky?
I don't know yet. I haven't decided. Probably not. Never. Oh, hey, look. It ran.
Hey, okay. So we are definitely in luck because it actually processed policy. So what happened was within that 2-hour randomization, the machine got policy. And then within 2-hour randomization, it did a software update scan, right? Yep. Now, our schedule is every 7 days, but we still actually saw an update come down from a new assignment completely outside of that 7-day schedule. It was triggered via a different mechanism, and that was because of a new policy.
Yep.
So I've actually seen, people kind of try to like really short the system. They're like, oh, I just deployed the updates and I need to get them out in 10 minutes to these machines, and it's not happening. It's ConfigMan is slow deliberately in some cases, right? It's built out for scale, and that scale includes randomization, as we can see like right here.
Mm-hmm. It's not so much even that it's weird because like it's a slow by design with purpose, right? Yeah. It's a don't break your own stuff type thing.
Yeah, for sure. So actually now if you go into WMI Explorer, because we should still have it open.
The updates down here.
Yeah, Client SDK.
Yeah, so let's go take a look over here in good old Client SDK, and let's go look at the actual software updates themselves.
So now we have an instance. This is really the object that exists in Software Center. And so we're going to see a few different things kind of pop up in here. We're going to see the name. We're going to see that max execution time, which we'll discuss as it relates to maintenance windows. And then there's some other bits and pieces. I mean, is it an Office 365 update? Because that's its whole can of worms itself. So this is definitely something, reboot outside service windows, right? So that's a setting that is on the assignment.
Deployment.
So,
yep. Yeah. So it's got, and you got your start time of like, when should we start it? When should it become available? What is its typing? All kinds of interesting things that are in there.
So now that we're at this point, I think we could really, let's assign a maintenance window and kind of walk through what a maintenance window looks like. And so we mentioned Max Runtime. If we can actually go and create a maintenance window that's too short.
Yep.
So if we go look in CCM service window on the left,
Yep. Okay, so you want to look at this one first? Yeah.
I was just going to show that it's empty. If we look at service window,
Yeah.
all right, well, it's empty in the type that we care about.
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting that you mentioned that of the type that we care about. So just kind of like, what are these then? So these are actually the business hours that get created on the machine that you see in Software Center. So if you actually go into Software Center and over here by default, you'll have, I don't remember the exact, I think it is 5 a.m. to 10 p.m.
That
or
is
something
it.
like that. Yeah. For Monday through Friday. And these are the business hours for it. Now, what's interesting about this and how this works is that you can, do this as well, which will basically say, you know what, automatically install anything as soon as business hours are over. Right. Which is kind of it triggers some interesting behavior, shall we say, and how it can ignore other maintenance windows then. Because it's almost like saying ignore maintenance windows.
Kind of. So, yeah, do you want to actually pull up the article? Because this could be a good thing to discuss. We do link this one, I believe.
Yeah, we do have that one in the Git book. Yep. Yeah.
So with business hours, you've got business hours and you've got maintenance windows. They are two related things. So when you deal with your business hours, you have those settings in the UI. When that box gets checked, it will, regardless of a maintenance window, as soon as business hours end and you enter non-business hours, it will install pending software updates and apps, even if you're not past the deadline. If the machine is past the available time and the checkbox is set to install automatically outside of business hours, the software update and restart will occur prior to the deadline. So that's a pretty important thing to note. Now, with the checkbox unchecked, that's actually, which is default, that's when you get that pop-up, right? And it says, hey, you've got pending software updates. If they actually, defer, it can install outside business hours. So this article talks about those overlap. And then if they do nothing, right, which this is kind of the more common one. Let's say you're away from your computer and the pop-up notification says, hey, you've got updates, and you never click a thing. That's it. They're done. You're going to hit the deadline eventually, and updates are going to apply. So this article talks about that overlap and how everything functions. It's a really good one to review.
Now, does that only get set from an end user coming into Software Center, or are there?
Yes.
Okay. So
it's 100% that.
You can technically set it via WMI. You can also technically set the schedule remotely via WMI and PowerShell if you want to.
Sure.
I've seen that done before at organizations with CIs, where they lock the user's business day schedule of what they consider defined as work hours.
So if I'm understanding it correctly, it's kind of designed to be, you have an end user that says, hey, I'm okay if it's after hours to get this done as soon as possible, right? So that's kind of the goal with business hours. Would that be?
Yep.
Okay.
That's the idea.
Gotcha.
Where it gets kind of odd, right? I've seen server admins before, app owners who get on a server and then they're poking around. They've checked that box and then they come back and say, hey, my server rebooted at 10:15 tonight. What happened? And that's not the patch window. And you go look and the checkbox is checked. And that's, hey, you're outside business hours. I'm going to reboot. So definitely something to be mindful of. And actually that type bit, it says type equals 6 on the right. We have the table in the doc that we're going to provide. We actually show you what each of those map out to. So this is the kind of layout of those. So once we create a maintenance window, depending on the type, we're either going to see 1 or 4, whether it's all deployments or a software update service window. And that's going to pop into WMI.
Yep. One other kind of cool thing to note before we go create the maintenance window that's just kind of an interesting thing is if you've ever messed with software updates and how this component works here, there's also this piece called the software updates manager piece here. And you can remotely grab updates in Software Center and force them to install using this WMI class here. So you actually say, get a list of all the software updates by getting the list of all these software updates here. So if we have this instance of this particular software update, we can take that instance, pass it to the software update manager, calling the method to invoke, pass an array of them actually to install the updates.
There it is. Yep. So in the in params, right, we can see that there's the CCM updates. It's an array of CCM underscore software updates.
Yep. So you pass a list of it, then it would install that list. So you could build out a query that says, hey, return all the ones of type, or get all the software updates that meet a specific category based on information that you pulled out of here, and then take that array of those objects and then throw it at here to forcibly install those. If you had an emergency critical, we need this patch to install right now type thing, if you were trying to do that without touching 100 machines or whatever. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a cool thing. All right, so maintenance windows. What is the timer on that? Is it 600 seconds, I think, on that software update?
Yeah, I want to say that
is
was 600, so I think it's 10 minutes.
Yeah, so we're
Because
going
we can show that here, actually. Go to the
Yeah.
properties and show it. Maximum runtime. Yep, 10 minutes.
Yep, 10 minutes. Okay. So let's go create a maintenance window for 5 minutes.
Hey, what's the default time for an update to run?
It depends on a lot of things. That's a
Yep.
good question.
Yeah,
It is.
I'd have to look it up to get all the direct answers, but
let's look at the Microsoft one. I want to say it's like 60 minutes for CUs, but it's on the
Well, so it depends on what type of an update it is for
yeah,
that,
because that's
right?
on the SUP, right? If you go to software update,
Yeah. Yeah, so they just added that piece, actually. I think that's pretty recent that they just added that, where you can configure and change that.
there's even newer ones in the technical preview. I think we've chatted about it before.
Yeah. So there's the one for feature updates here.
120, 365, and non-feature updates for Windows, which would be like LCUs, .NET, Internet, whatever, 60. And then the default otherwise actually depends on when your config.man site was set up.
Yep. And if it's being published by some third-party provider, right? Because that also is an instance. So, like in the case of this particular one, I'm going to assume that we set that particular time, right? Based on
we can't. No.
Oh no. Okay.
No, I wish we could, but we cannot control it.
We in theory we potentially could if we have the right rights. I think we have a user voice for modifying max runtime, so it's something that we might potentially look at in the future. But it's kind of hard to get it to correspond to when the syncs happen and when. Yeah.
Right. We can change it after the fact, but we can't publish it with a specific setting. So it is 10 if you did a fresh install of config.man on version 15.11 or higher. It is 5 minutes if you came from any other version. So that's why we saw a default of 10-minute max runtime there.
Yep. So here's the user voice if people would be interested in like non-Microsoft updates having it set.
That was for a deferral.
Okay, so maintenance windows, is that where we were going next, Jordan? Collections? Yep. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so if we come back over here, so we're going to create a maintenance window. I'm debating if we should increase the time, because I don't know if a 5-minute maintenance window will do what we want it to do, but we can try.
No, it might not hurt to just bump the max runtime on that update. We can check in WMI. I mean, let's go bump that max runtime to 2 hours.
Yeah, it's fine. You can just change in WMI and then it'll be fine.
No, change it on the update.
You don't want to hack the system?
No.
So let's do today, right?
Sure.
So today at, it's 9:10 a.m. it says.
I think the client might be an hour. I think it's 10:10 on the client.
This will be in client local time. Right. So
yeah, I think the clients went out. Yeah.
10:10. Okay. Yeah. So if we do 10, oops, that's not what I wanted. 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. 30 a.m. Yep. That should be fine. Let's do of type software updates, because why not?
That's only happening on the first. Hold on. That happens the one day of every 1 month.
Daily. Now it's not. Now it's every day. Now it's all the time. That seems reasonable, right? So now we get a maintenance window every day that people can install patches on. And if we go software library, let's do this. Set this to 60 minutes. Or we can even do more. We can do 120.
Yeah.
Seems reasonable. Apply.
So we can go do policy update and go make
we
sure
should
that
get
that
it. Yep.
gets.
We could just run software update scan too.
Yeah, so I mean, when it comes to software updates, I know when I've dealt with, being the kind of one that has to answer to why did something not install, right? There's a lot of factors, and one of the big ones is going to be maintenance windows. And there's some other interesting ones too. So a gotcha that I've ran into was it kind of caught me by surprise, but it makes sense in hindsight. The CCM client has to be started and running. CCM exec service has to be started and running at the start of a maintenance window. Otherwise, updates won't apply. And so what you might see is if for some reason you are rebooting prior to a maintenance window, or if somebody turns on their laptop, for example, during a maintenance window, updates are not going to start installing, even if they're past a deadline and in a maintenance window. The CCM, there is actually a trigger that happens at the start of a maintenance window to kick off assignments, and that won't happen after the fact, right? So maintenance window starts at 10 a.m., CCM exec starts at 10:05, updates aren't going to start installing. They will not actually occur.
Try another.
Trigger a
Try
software update scan cycle this time.
a policy too. I wonder if we hit that too quick.
Could be.
Looks like it's got it. See if there's a service window in WMI, just to see if it got that part.
Yeah. Not yet.
Did you double click refresh instances? Yeah, it looks like you did.
Mm-hmm.
There it is.
There it is.
Right there.
Yep. So here's our software update maintenance window. So we've got that now. Now we just need to see if our software update will hit its execution time. That'll update.
That has not. You know what?
I don't think it will once it's in WMI.
I'm not sure. There was actually somebody on Discord who talked about having this problem. They never saw the update on the endpoint change its max execution time. Now that I think about it, like once it had received policy, they were doing it for feature updates, but I'm almost wondering if that is the case, if it will not change.
It might be, but we can at least kind of look through here, and so we can actually see in the log file, the different runtimes of whether they're available or not.
So right there, right, there exists a service window of this type. The program will run eventually.
Yep.
So you'll actually see in the log file, if we were able to get it to flip that runtime, it will actually tell you the program will never run. It's a very dark. It's just like, it's not happening ever. Versus like the program will run eventually. And so there are actually methods in WMI that get called to make these determinations. So if you go into that CCM, I want to say if you go to the CCM service window, right here.
This one, yeah.
So these methods get called, and then they have a couple of bits. So one of them, right, there's that fallback to all programs window. We talked about that setting, and that's actually also a setting on that's just there. Yeah, client settings there. Mm-hmm. So with this, right, this gets called. It says, hey, what service window type are we working with? What's the max runtime of the update or the application that you're evaluating? And am I allowed to fall back to an all programs window? Those all get ran through, and it's going to give back, a Boolean of, can I actually run this now? And then there's also, is future window available? So these get used contextually, right? There's, when I get policy, hey, is this ever going to run? And then also, just as it's about to run, it has to check and validate, am I allowed to run now? So those methods are going to get called and evaluate your service window types and your client settings and your assignments and deadlines and business hours, and then actually determine what happens.
try to see if it updates. It doesn't look like it does, so that might actually be something worth digging into.
Yeah, I vaguely remember somebody in the community mentioning this. It was for feature updates, but I assume it's just kind of the same failure.
Yeah, I mean, we can cheat.
You've got to change the max runtime before it hits the client.
Before it hits the client, but we can do that because we know when it'll hit the client.
I'll pause while Chrome is publishing, since that might take a few minutes. Let me grab the mouse here, Jordan.
Yeah. There we go. All right, cool. So we've gone ahead and we have published Google Chrome, and we've set its maximum runtime to 120. And we did change the deployment now so that it is deploying right now with a deadline of right now. So it should be all I want to deploy, I want to install right now for it. So if we go back to our client, we can actually see that if we go to the Google Chrome update, that it's got an execution time of 7,200. Okay. And if we go here, we can see Google Chrome is showing up in Software Center. And if we go to our service window log, let's see, there we go. The program will not run. Program cannot run also. And there we go. We can see that we have a service window. Scroll up here. Here's the part where we call, hey, go enumerate the service windows that are available. Only service window available that could, satisfy the criteria. Runtime 7,200 is type 4. Duration is 0 days, 30 minutes. Find biggest merged time window. 4 not found. Can program run? False. Will program run called? No.
So 70.
There does not exist a service window of this type for the duration required. The program will not run.
So 7,200, is that the seconds of the update?
Yeah.
Now, does this calculate only the update with the highest max runtime, or would it be all within the group?
Ooh, good point.
So the way that the docs actually state it is updates are evaluated from the longest max runtime to the shortest max runtime, and it evaluates that per update. So it's going to basically say, hey, I have a update that's 120 minutes. I'm going to check and see, is there a maintenance window of the correct type that is at least 120 minutes? Run it, and then after it completes, evaluate again for the next update.
So
with 125 minutes, right?
Well,
because it adds 5 minutes for reboots.
So in theory, since Notepad++ is 10 minutes, even if we had a 30-minute window, it would never apply that because the highest one is 2 hours. Is that right?
No, it will continue down the list, and it does evaluate all of them, right? So it kicks that one out and says you cannot install, but it should evaluate that Notepad++ can install.
Yep.
Cool. So what's next step? Maybe make the window bigger?
Technically speaking, Notepad won't fit either because the window ends in 7 minutes from now. In this case here, from when we tested it, 7 plus 5 is not sufficient time, so.
Yep.
It
still doesn't actually have enough time.
Yep.
Oh, there it is. 900. Is that the Notepad window getting checked? 900 seconds.
Yes, actually it is. That's 15 minutes. Yep.
Okay.
There it is.
That makes sense. Cool.
Yeah.
And actually it's the type. So type 2 is the one we would, you can see the different types are getting called, right? So there's one for type 2. It's checking the different types and running and seeing like, hey, does this all match up? There's type 4. You got to see, all of those different factors are getting checked.
Yeah, which then leads to an interesting question, right? Because if you can attach a maintenance window to a collection, and if you have an environment that has a lot of collections, right, without going and looking at the log files, how do you figure out when your maintenance windows really are for machines, right? So we'll include this in the blog post, but here's a very quick little SQL query that you can run. You just need to replace the name of the machine down here and probably add a parameter in there at the top to make it a little more parameterized and friendly. But basically you just throw that in there, hit run, and then it will tell you, here's the name. Apparently I can't spell updates, the collection that maintenance window came from, the description of the maintenance window, when it starts, what its duration is, and is it currently enabled.
So if we go make another window, let's make it on another collection maybe that device is in. That's long enough to see these install. And then if we run this query again, we should see essentially 2 different windows. Yeah, let's just do all desktops for testing.
And there's a little note there in the log file too. It mentions, chain, maintenance window chain. So maintenance windows are cumulative. They're additive, right? So you could have multiple of them that string together. So that's a good thing to note. You may end up with a device in multiple collections or has multiple maintenance windows. And if they, start and end within their own timeframes, they can actually have a longer maintenance window than you think.
Yeah. And that one will be 3 hours, which is long enough, and it can happen every day. Sure.
I think your time's still off though, right?
It doesn't really matter what time if all we're trying to do is showcase the thing, does it?
Well, let's see if we can get them to install maybe. What do you think?
Gotcha.
That could be
Yeah.
a good one to look at.
Yeah.
So
We do something like 10:30, 30, and then 11:30.
that wouldn't
Let's
be
do
long enough.
like
Yeah,
3.
like 3 p.m.
It's like-
yeah.
1 p.m. even is plenty of time.
I don't know. We have 2 hours. We have 10 minutes. We have restart. Maybe it's enough. 2 hours and 30 minutes. Yeah, I think that's good.
There we go. Oh, apparently I lost my name. Updates 2. Okay.
Uh,
No, it doesn't.
updates 3. You already made one for this collection.
Oh, that's right.
And then daily, probably.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Here we go.
Apply.
Must have hit enter and didn't realize I hit enter.
So once this gets saved in the database, we should see that query return, 3 windows now?
Yeah, yep. So now if I just update its memberships, now the machine's in the collection.
Yep, there it is.
So now we can see that it's got these 3 different windows on these 3 different days.
Just think.
So now if we come back over here to our client, and if we do machine policy run, go back to service windows, you should see policy agent finish up here in a second.
Yeah, I wonder if we kicked that too soon. Is that more?
That looks like more to me.
Yeah, I think so. 1800.
Yep.
Cool.
Type 1. Yep.
Yeah. What did we have client settings set to, though? Will client settings allow that to happen? I don't remember what we had client settings set to.
Now that you have the 2 types, I want to say it's set to no, but I could be wrong. Yeah, it's set to no.
Yeah, it's set to no.
So technically, they're still not going to be able to install.
Yep.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Because they have both Windows types available.
Yep.
So
We can fix that,
was
though.
this last window, you made it for all deployments instead of updates? Was that the issue?
You got it.
Yeah.
So what does the client actually look like if you go run a eval cycle? And does it show anything useful in the log?
It should mention, yeah, so the fallback bit, right? That's that Boolean's going to end up basically saying fallback allowed no within the service windows. So when the method gets called on Service Window Manager to say, is it allowed to run? You're going to pass a Boolean false for fallback. So I think the log shows it. I think it does.
In
Service Window Manager. Yeah, we should see in Service Window Manager. There we go. Service window, this type exists. Let's see, can program run? Enumerate. I don't know if it's actually that verbose. Maybe it's not. Is that now? It is now-ish. Type 6. That's interesting. Maybe it does not mention the fallback. I'm a little surprised. I thought it did. I do not see it.
Let's just go change these though real quick from all deployments to software updates. That should be pretty quick. What will be kind of interesting about that is we should see the WMI value change for them.
Types should change.
So nothing new. Maybe try it once more. I wonder if it didn't. Yeah.
This is new. It's still doing the assignment request, yeah?
There.
Do it again, though.
Guess.
Actually just saw some fun numbers fly through. It's definitely, yeah.
Yep.
So go check Software Center. There it goes.
Yeah, look at that.
Because now they're actually available. So if we go back and we check the service window.
Can run is true.
Yep.
There you go.
Program can run. So we went ahead and said, hey, the service window has time, so we'll start installing.
So which update did it kick off first?
Google Chrome.
And that's because it's
because it starts in
the
the
longest one. Okay, that
Yeah.
makes
It had the longest runtime. Yeah. That's the claim anyway.
Yeah, it seems to be working though. Oh,
And our sample size of 1.
And they're done. It worked.
Yeah. So I think there was one last thing we wanted to take a look at, which was a third-party software update client setting. So this is a pretty quick one, but good to mention because it does 2 things. One of them may not be as obvious. So enable third-party software updates got introduced with third-party software updates. So the 2 things it does, one is if the configman site has a code signing certificate in the database, which we can show, the client will be able to pull it down and install it in the respective certificate stores. So within the configman subcomponent, if we actually find a certificate listed in the third-party updates tab here, this plus the client setting of yes, a client, if it's 1806 or above, will receive the code signing certificate and then install it in trusted publishers and trusted root if needed. The other component that yes does for the client setting is change a registry setting, actually. They will adjust the trusted, trust intranet sources setting in the registry on the client.
Yeah.
I forget the verbiage.
The trusted publisher. It says it allows allow them from a trusted publisher. We have a blog post on it.
Yeah. And so, if that setting is not there, you'll actually see, various errors that pop up that we've got pretty well documented. So under Windows Update here, there it is, except Trusted Publisher
one. Yep.
That right there flips to 1, actually gets created, I think, and gets
it
flipped
doesn't
to 1
exist otherwise. Yep.
when the client setting is set to yes. So that's the 2 big things that actually does. I've seen this not get populated, even though it should. Some customers have implemented configuration items or proactive remediation in order to make sure it exists. So, I mean, that's kind of the big ones that we wanted to cover in that software update client settings section. There are a couple of other components. If you look in that list in that window, there's some bits around thread priority for feature updates. There's some other ones around like Office 365 update management, which does flip a registry setting for, Office COM object management. So there are some other bits and pieces, but we wanted to cover kind of some of the big ones that we think can be pain points.
And then kind of the last thing here, just to wrap up, there's a really nice article, and it should get more love than I think what it does is the introduction to software updates in Configuration Manager. There's some really interesting kind of deep dive knowledge bits in here that it talks about. Things like the time to live file that gets set for how often to get or to scan against WSUS is actually mentioned in here. I've never seen that mentioned anywhere else in any of the docs other than in this page in here.
Yeah, if you just
kind of the different state informations and things like that.
TTL, there it is.
Yep, here it is. Yeah, so what the time to live is on how long the metadata should store and live locally. But yeah, there's just some interesting anecdotes and information about how the software update process works and works in conjunction with config manager and policy for the workflow. I think is really beneficial in reading this article.
Cool. Yeah, I think that covers most of what we wanted today. I think the next one, it sounds like we might talk about application policy. Is that right?
Yep.
Cool. I think Andrew's going to be
sure.
looking at that quite a bit. Yeah, but outside of that, thank you for watching, and hope it was helpful.